Coming up on Folks, Louisiana is fast becoming the toxic chemical capital of the nation. The air and water may be slowly killing the residents of this state, and it affects the black and poor first. A look at why you should be concerned about toxic pollution on today's edition of Folks. Hello everyone and welcome to Folks. I'm Sonya Masingale. Toxic chemical pollution is a concern that ultimately affects every man, woman, and child in the state of Louisiana. But there's evidence that toxic pollution may have a more immediate effect on the black and poor of this state because so many of the chemical processors are located in or near black communities. Today we take a look at one such community north of Baton Rouge that's literally fighting for its life in the shadow of a large toxic waste plant. Alsen and St. Irma Lee are small rural communities where people have gone quietly about their lives for well over 50 years. But several chemical companies have built up and surrounded the homes in the areas, including Rollins Environmental Services, a toxic chemical treatment facility. Now, Rollins has been in the area for about 20 years, but approximately 10 years ago, Rollins began burning toxic chemicals, and the residents of Alsen began to feel and see the effects of those toxic chemicals. Today, you will meet some of the people in that area, but first, a look at some of the staggering environmental problems facing Louisiana. Officials have identified over 60 hazardous waste sites that threaten the safety of the environment. At least 5 of them have been found to be leaking chemicals and contaminating the ground, seeping into the drinking water supply. In addition to existing and abandoned hazardous waste sites, Louisiana generates more hazardous waste per person than any other state. Approximately 6.3 million pounds of toxic materials are released by 14 Baton Rouge area chemical companies. In spite of the fact that no one really knows what these chemicals turn into when they mix with other chemicals they come in contact with, and no one knows exactly where they come down, spokesmen for those 14 chemical companies say that those 6.3 million pounds of toxic materials pose no health hazards to local residents. Students at Southern University say that there are days that they are nauseated by odors from nearby chemical companies, and that the water on that campus is not fit to drink. The 64-year-old campus is wedged between 2 toxic waste treatment facilities, Rollins Environmental Services and Stauffer Chemicals, which recently received a permit to release toxic chemicals. In fact, many toxic waste sites and emissions directly affect African American and poor urban and rural residents.
We feel probably the low-income and the minority people are most at risk and bear the greatest burden because often, not always, but often the facilities are sited next to a low-income or minority community. And that's one of the things that we're trying to help with.
Mary Lee Orr is director of the Louisiana Environmental Action Network. She says that African Americans in Louisiana have a good reason to be concerned about pollution.
I think we should be most concerned about the carcinogens that are in the air, the carcinogens that are in the water, the toxic chemicals that are in the land. I think one of the things that disturbed me when I first got started was when Pat Norton said in a meeting, it isn't the sites that we know about, it's the sites that we don't know about. It's the hundreds of sites that are going to crop up that we don't know about. And considering the ones that we do know about and how enormous they are, that's frightening to me.
Vincent Watkins is field director of Christians for Good Government, a group fighting to keep Rollins Environmental Services from expanding their operations. They say that the Rollins plant poses an extremely dangerous threat to the largely black and poor residential area nearby.
Interesting. Christians for Government is made up of several hundred people. People who have taken it upon themselves to join in this struggle to stop Rollins. We don't have a membership. You don't pay us a dues. You don't fill out a registration fee. You take part in what we are doing and you move.
What environmental issues are the Christians for Good Government primarily concerned with?
Well, I tell people also that we're not an environmentalist group. We're not a Greenpeace or Sierra. We're a people's organization. We are not a group of individuals that, if they were cutting down all the trees, I don't know that we would be out there for that purpose, to build a mall. Other environmental organizations may be. Our issue is that there are people to be considered. Something I call the human factor must be considered in the dissemination of all the information in this decision-making process of whether there should be an application awarded to Rollins, or rather a permit awarded to Rollins, so they can burn more hazardous waste, burn various types of hazardous waste and other chemicals. The bottom line issue is that there are lives that are being contaminated and poisoned, shortened, endangered by this substance. Rollins has not acknowledged that there are living individuals, human beings across the street. We have serious problems with that because, be them young, old, black, white, they are human beings. And Rollins has failed to acknowledge that. Rollins has not supplied these individuals with an escape plan. They have not supplied them with an informational sheet that would explain to them where where they should go, or retreat in the instant that there is a hazardous waste explosion or a truck. For instance, they have a lot of activity on the highway. If a truck was to have an accident, there was a leakage or a spillage from one of the tanks or one of the trucks, the individuals don't know if they're supposed to go out Scenic Highway, if they're to go towards Baton Rouge, if they're to go towards Baker, if they're to go out and travel towards Scotland Avenue. They don't know. We don't know.
Rollins is located a few miles outside of Baton Rouge, right next to the small communities of Alsen and St. Irma Lee, an area that was known for good hunting and good fishing. But there is no hunting and fishing allowed now because the area is too contaminated. Alice Cage and her husband own and live behind this small store in Alsen, just a few blocks away from Rollins.
I suffer with sore throat, itchy eyes, and dry coughing.
How long have you had that problem?
Oh, for the last 6 or 8 years, at least.
And how long has Rollins been over there?
Rollins been over there for about 20 or 25 years. But see, when they first came there, they wasn't burning that stuff. They was putting it in pits or something.
The smell is just be so bad at times. And especially when it's heavy, when it's real, real foggy. When all of the smell is down to the, can't lift up and stay down to the ground. And we have to suffer and try and live through that because it's just really bad.
No, I don't want them to buy me out because I'm not going nowhere else. They can leave themselves. They might not leave, but I'm not particular about buying me out.
Why?
Why? Because I've been here all my life.
I want them to move. I want them to get out, go somewhere where, in the deserts, that's where they needs to be. Where there's nobody there. No, nothing but the sand and them, that's all.
Sometime at night I've been sleeping. The odors woke me up. And I thought the house had an odor. So especially if I had the window up, and I said, what in the world I smell in this house? I thought it might have been probably the sewage or something out there. I said, no, it can't be the sewage, because, we're tired in our sewage. So finally, I noticed when we put the window down, I don't smell those odors no more. But if that window crack, that odor would get in this house, and it is a terrible odor, too.
The first thing I would like to hope and pray for is they do not give Rollins another permit to be a more hazardous way here in in our house, in our homes, because it's dangerous, it's unhealthy, and I know it because I worked with petrol processors for 7 years. Every kind of chemical that Rollins dumped over there, I can tell you about it. I can tell you what it'll do. I can tell you what effect it'll take on you. And what got me off of worry is the DEQ to me, they're going in with Rollins. Rollins supposed to burn a lot of stuff for them. They are our only hope and the judge. That really have me worried about Rollins now. If they take side with Rollins, well then they are digging our graves.
Right now, there is no bright light. If people realize the amount of pollution and contamination we had in this state, they would pause and say that we have to do something about the problem. Right now, there are a lot of people who have indicated a concern with the environment, but that has to be translated in dollars from the legislature. It also has to be translated into more of a public outcry where the individuals say, make this a priority in the legislature and make sure that we get some kind of funding. If we do not get that kind of outcry from the public, then when it comes to the legislature, it'll be a matter of status quo. And if you maintain status quo, many of the things that we have become comfortable with, like clean water, clean air, hunting lands and fishing areas, those things will be endangered species.
No question about it. I think pretty much all across America, most of your highly concentrated industry that deals with hazardous waste disposal located in your economically deprived areas. And I think it's unconscionable, and I think the conscience of this nation must do something about that. And I think people are tired of legislators talking about the problem. They're tired of the legislature making laws to do something about the problem. People want affirmative action now. They want something done about the problem.
Alsen and St. Irma Lee are not the only two predominantly black communities being directly affected by toxic chemical pollution, but their fight typifies what we'll be seeing more and more of in the days to come. Joining me in the studio to discuss what our state officials are trying to do to clean up the Louisiana environment is Mr. Willie Fontenot. Mr. Fontenot is an environmental specialist in the Citizens Access Unit of the Attorney General's Office. And Mr. Tim Hardy, an attorney. He is Assistant Secretary of the Office of Solid and Hazardous Waste in the Department of Environmental Quality. Welcome to folks.
Thank you.
Mr. Hardy, what is the role of the Department of Environmental Quality in situations such as this one?
The department has a primary responsibility to decide whether to issue or to deny a permit. The permit application is made with the department. There are a number of things that the department has to do. It conducts hearings, puts the permit out for public review. It deals with the permit, the person that has applied for the permit, and we basically have to let the public know what's going on. Ultimately, a decision is rendered by the department as to whether or not it is granted or denied.
Okay, when someone, anyone, applies for a permit to emit some sort of waste, do they have to tell you what they're going to do and how it affects people?
Absolutely. They have to tell us exactly what they're going to burn, what they're going to be bringing on site, what they're going to store, exactly what they're going to do as it relates to the permit. As far as how it affects people, of course, there are monitors they have to have. We have to know what's coming out of the stacks, what's going into the ground. We have to have monitoring equipment to know whether or not it's leaching out, getting into groundwater, and that is leachate detection systems, leak detection systems. We have to know exactly how everything is functioning. And of course, the whole purpose of all of that is to ensure that the people are being protected, that our drinking water sources are being protected, that the air is being protected. That's the purpose of the whole process.
Okay. What about in this particular case? Which way is the DEQ leaning, if you can discuss that with us?
Well, to be very honest, I can't say how we're leaning because we have not even finished the adjudicatory hearing. There is a formal process that we're going through. We are receiving comments under oath by members of the regulated community, more specifically the Rollins people. We're receiving testimony from other groups that are intervenors, from citizens that live in that area. And after we have completed that process, then we'll have the information to make a final decision. It would be premature for me at this point to say exactly how we're leaning. The only thing that I can tell you, and it's no secret, that this is one permit, as will the others be with this administration and DEQ, that will be very, very highly scrutinized.
Okay. Mr. Fontenot, can you tell me how the Attorney General's office fits into all of this, and specifically, what is a Citizens Access Unit?
Okay, well, the Attorney General of Louisiana is William Gus, Jr., who is He's the chief legal officer for the state and represents the state and specifically the Department of Environmental Quality in lawsuits either against somebody who is polluting, or if somebody files a lawsuit against the state agencies, the Attorney General represents them. And the Attorney General has, specifically in the case of Rollins, collected a number of fines against Rollins since, I guess, 1973, when they had one of their first major spills. The Citizens Access Unit, something that the Attorney General formed more than 10 years ago, and I'm the whole unit. And what I do primarily is work with individuals and groups and help them figure out how to get information and how to identify which agencies are the proper agencies to work with and how to prepare for hearings. And in the last 10 and a half years have helped more than 200 groups organize in Louisiana and about 30 other states. And it first started working with people who live around Rollins in 1978, and by 1980 had developed a working relationship with people around Rollins in Louisiana, New Jersey, and Texas, where they have two of their other facilities. And basically found that hazardous waste was being dumped in a lot of different places in the United States where it shouldn't be dumped. There were very few regulations. In 1978, the state of Louisiana had no laws specifically controlling hazardous waste or how you dispose it, or even requiring that somebody get a permit to operate a facility. All you had to do at that time was get a letter from the health department saying you could operate a facility and just operate it nicely.
Yeah, our legislators are even aware of the fact that we've got some great laws on the book. The problem is not with the laws at this point, it's with the enforcement. But I have to ask, is this group out of Alsen and St. Irma Lee, is that unusual in the state of Louisiana now? Is their situation unique?
No, Louisiana actually has probably more citizens groups working on more environmental type problems than any state in the country. It's Vermont, New York, a couple of other states have fairly active citizens groups, but Louisiana is one of the more active groups, or more active states. And it runs the gamut of socioeconomic situations, and a lot of groups from poor areas and minorities that have gotten involved and have been very effective and have been responsible for bringing about a lot of the change. Some of the elected officials that have played key roles in trying to change problems in the state have been people like Kip Holden and Cleo Fields.
I have to ask, just how effective are these groups in getting the Department of the Environmental Quality or getting the companies to listen to them? How effective are they?
Well, they've been very effective. One of their problems is most of them have, before they get involved in say, a permit or trying to do something about a leaking waste site, have never been involved with City Hall or the legislature, don't know who their elected officials are, don't know how to work with the media. And so they have to go through a learning process of how to become involved in what's going on in their community. A lot of times they don't even know who their own neighbors are. And so what comes out of these battles for a cleaner and safer environment is that communities get together and start looking at other problems in the community, not just say the problems they're having with pollution from Rollins, but improving the overall economic and social conditions in the community. And Alsen community in particular has done a lot in the last 10 years with education, recreation, streets, sewage, flooding, all sorts of things.
Mr. Hardy, how effective are these groups in helping the DEQ to make their decisions about permits for solid waste and air waste, whatever?
I think they've been very effective. Of course, there's no magic formula as to what weight we give to what they give us. At the same time, they've raised our sensitivities in a lot of areas. They let us know about problems that we might not know about in many instances. They might have problems with respect to the air that they breathe as a result of releases from these sites. They might have groundwater contamination problems in their wells that we would not know about had they not come to us. And many of the things that they have done have resulted in legislation laws that actually go on the books. As I said earlier, this administration has a very open door policy to citizens groups, and we don't want to do things in the dark. Of course, you know, some things have to be things that are enforcement sensitive. We have to have closed sessions, but by and large, we're open. We invite them. We readily invite them in. And although I can't tell you exactly to what degree it's going to matter, because it's discretionary with the Secretary, Dr. Paul Tomplay will have the final say in what the department wants to do. But we are always very interested in knowing how the citizens will be impacted by what we are doing at DEQ.
Okay. There were, last year, because of the Right to Know bill, 14 chemical companies in Baton Rouge and Port Allen got together and reported that they were emitting, or had emitted in the past year, approximately 6.3 million pounds of toxic chemicals, but that it posed no threat to the local residents. How can they say that? They don't know what happens when those different chemicals mix in the air, or where they come down, or where they wind up in the water, and yet they say that there's no threat. How can they say that?
I agree with you. That sounds a little strange to us, too. One problem we have is we simply don't have enough data. You know, we're still fairly a new administration coming into DEQ. And although I am not over the air quality division, one thing I know we have to determine is exactly where we stand. We don't know exactly what's coming out of what stacks, so we are going to have to get monitors installed to find out what's coming out, where it's going, because one thing we know is that we have an ozone problem here in Baton Rouge. You're probably aware that we've lost a few industries lately as a result of not being able to site them here in the Baton Rouge area. To be very honest, we have yet to determine exactly where the problems are coming from. We have some ideas, but we have to find out exactly, and we are not going to rely upon what one side says. We have to make an independent finding and as to exactly what the problems are and where they're coming from.
I found that interesting that they would say that it poses no threat. I have a copy of an article about that. So they really did say that. They really did say it poses no threat, but no one really knows and I think that's what's so frightening to a lot of people. It's people want to be reassured that something is going to be done, and yet it's hard to do that when we've known about a lot of these things for over 10 years, but very little has been done. What's the future in Louisiana environment? When are these things going to get done? When are we going to start seeing some real results?
Well, the one good thing is the DEQ has gotten significant increased funding, and we hope we'll get a lot more. Governor Romer has decided that the environment is a priority, so funding has been increased. We're hiring a lot more people. We'll have more inspectors, people in the fields. We want to be able to find out what's coming from these facilities, and like I said in the past, we have not been able to. So once we get a handle on, we'll be able to do a better job. Also, you're going to see increased enforcement. You might have heard that enforcement is up at the DEQ, and you'll see more of it. We want to have some predictability. We're not going to go out on witch hunts, but when folks violate the law and our rules and regulations, some of them are going to have to pay. And that's the direction we're going in, and we hope that will, over the next few years, start to alleviate some of these problems.
Mr. Fontenot, where are we going? What is going to happen to people from Alsen and St. Irma Lee and in other communities like them around the state?
Well, I don't think anyone could tell you what's going to happen to them, but like I said earlier, people in these areas and across Louisiana are getting organized and getting involved in what's going on in their communities. And finally, I mean, problems at Rollins have been going on since 1971, but Rollins is not really the total problem. There are two very bad abandoned waste sites near there. The companies that send their waste to Rollins are somewhat responsible because they're generating the hazardous waste and have been giving it to companies through the years without really caring how the waste was handled. And some of the largest companies in Louisiana are the companies that have been sending their waste to small waste disposal companies. But to go back to what you said earlier about the companies doing a report saying that there's no problem, I think the way they probably phrased that was that we have no information and no data showing that there's any problem. What we don't have in Louisiana, is most other places, is we don't have someone going out knocking door to door and saying, well, how's everybody in the house doing? Do you have anybody who has flu or skin problems or whatever else. And I think that if surveys like that were done, we would find that many people who live near petrochemical facilities are having health problems. It's something that you have to study over a lifetime, or at least over 10, 20, 30 years, to determine what sort of problems people have. But I think there are a lot of people who work in the industries and who live near them who are adversely affected. And it's not just people who live right next to them. You could live 10, 20 miles away and be adversely affected through the drinking water, or through the air you breathe, or it could be an area that becomes contaminated and then some food product becomes contaminated that you eat. I mean, we have chemicals that are banned for use in the United States that are exported and used outside of the United States on food products that are then shipped in, and you go to the health food store or the grocery counter and buy some product that is grown naturally with chemicals that are banned in the United States.
The problems are staggering,
Yeah.
and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight, but it's comforting to know that at least we're working on it. I would like to say that if you'd like more information about organizing your fight against toxic chemical pollution, you can call the Louisiana Environmental Action Network at 504-928-1315. That's all we have time for on today's program. Be sure to join us next week for another edition of Folks. Bye-bye.